Okay. Hello, hello. Welcome and welcome. Want to make sure that we are live. It is showing that we are actively on. Amazing. Welcome. Oh my goodness. Welcome, 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 welcome. I'm so excited to be with you all today. Okay. So, before anything else, I really just wanted to say thank you. I wanted to thank everyone who's watched, liked, commented, or subscribed so far. Wow. This page is still so very new, and honestly, I did not expect things to get moving so quickly. I really did not expect for things to get to moving so quickly. But I'm just so excited that you all are really taking to the content that I've been already putting out and I've curated for you all. I'm just so excited that I got access to go live last night. So I said I definitely wanted to explain the overall experience of what I'm offering here at Legally Everywhere. So essentially, I have it all set up through the lens of a buffet, right? And I wanted to make sure that I gave you all a really warm welcome, but then also a really cool and concise introduction so that it all makes sense, right? So, with that being said, right? I got access yesterday and I kind of wanted to honor the overall setting by being clear and outlining the full foundation. And you'll see why I'm laying, this kind of structure right now for the channel. So I want you to see visually how I plan to have things outlined and organized, and how you can treat it like, let's call it a civic literacy buffet. That's what I want to call it. Okay? So let's just call this your civic literacy buffet. Okay? So if you're new to me, we'll start by saying hello. My name is Adrienne. I am an international law student studying common law. Okay? And I've spent years working as a social worker and a mediator. So my brain naturally lives at the intersection of law systems and real lives, right? Like people's real lives and the actual experience of things, right? And how things can impact a life, right? So the impact element, that is something that I've spent quite a bit of my professional career understanding, assessing, and trying to figure out, like, what can we do with the information that we have, and how can we use the information so that we can be more informed and make decisions that will help us be able to either cope with the situations that we're in, or so at least that we can feel active, engaged in what is going on. Because a big part of it, I feel like sometimes, is just being able to feel informed so you can figure out how you want to move with the situations that we're often placed in. And then you can make informed decisions and not just feel like you're kind of stuck just making a decision because you didn't have enough information. You have almost like a buyer's remorse type of vibe. So with that being said, this channel isn't just like law school talk. It's about basic civic literacy questions that matter to anybody living under those systems, right? So what am I looking at, right? What have I agreed to or consented to? Sometimes without even realizing, because I don't think we think about all the agreements to a degree that we make on a everyday basis. So what have I agreed to or consented to sometimes without realizing it? What contracts and frameworks am I walking into just by living, right? Just like clicking in, signing, existing in certain spaces. And when I say clicking, I mean, a lot of times we just be clicking stuff on our phones, accepting all these agreements, right? What did I sign up for? And here's where we kind of strip away some of the fancy rhetoric and we really just ask the basic questions like, what does this document actually say? What does this policy actually do? And how does it show up in everyday life? Right? So, as I kind of outlined right here on the PowerPoint as well, it just follows the impact into real life, right? Something as simple as your pantry, right? We've been watching the news. We've seen some viral stuff. Your bills, the bills that they pass, right? Schools, right? The overall educational structure. Let's call it governmental bodies. Your neighborhood. Like, how is this set thing going to impact you individually? Because before we can dive into doctrines and all of that, we need to ask the simple question, like, how does it affect me? How does it affect my loved ones? How does it affect the things that I'm doing on the day to day? So that's something that we dive into. Okay, so let's kind of get into the receipts element, right? Because I call it a receipts buffet for a reason. If you'll get to know me pretty well being on this platform and being on this channel, but I love receipts. I love going to get the information from the source and really looking at it, diving in and getting my own interpretation of what this receipt means, right? And making connections. So you're going to hear me say this a lot. I'm not here to run anybody's party marketing. I don't really do politics, right? I work with receipts. That's what I work with. I like to work with the receipts. Public documents, laws and doctrines, executive orders. I do plan to really sink my teeth in some executive orders. Agency rules and reports, and sometimes even like peer-reviewed research articles, because sometimes I feel like we get some really interesting information there. So there might be times that I lean on those kinds of documents. I'm going to say sometimes that's exactly what I'm going to lean into while we're in here. But I'll sometimes touch a little bit of the peer review. Everything I reference, right? I want to get this very clear. Everything that I reference is something you can, in principle, access yourself through public sites, a library, or even looking up the materials, I name. The goal is not to say, believe me, right? I don't want you saying, oh, I just believe that. It's more so to kind of see, here's the trail, right? The paper trail. Go verify it on your own. You can either take what you see and recognize some of the patterns that you see that I was able to connect, or you could take it and go find whatever patterns and things that you may find. Or you can read those same exact documents and doctrines and come to your own conclusion. I am merely just providing receipts, some information, and connecting dots, right? So my hope is that we are able to really get our teeth into some of these documents and doctrines. Another thing that I'm going to do as I do live presentations and I kind of connect patterns, I'm going to put what I'm going to call like a static version of my presentation. So you don't have to go through the issue of jumping through like, man, I wanted that one PowerPoint or I wanted that one slide and I couldn't get it. Because I sure used to hate when I would go to conferences and presentations and I would be having to go back through 3 hours worth of material just for like 1 or 2 slides, when in actuality, I can give you a static version. It'll actually be easier than trying to deal with a power or a PDF, because I'm going to just probably put 5 seconds in between every slide so you have time to screenshot it and keep it for your record and use that to collect your receipts and whatever things that you plan to investigate and look into or learn further about. So you're probably looking at this playlist, and I'm going to explain that pretty shortly here. Okay. So essentially, this is how I'm going to have everything structured, right? So when you go to a buffet, you usually have your different sections, right? You have your different sections, your different flavors, your different little swags and things that are going on. Okay? So what's going to happen is we have orientation and spine, right? And just so you know, every station that I have for this buffet, I have actually already created a playlist. So if you say, hey, I'm really only interested in, let's say, the backbone of a lot of this stuff, I just want to get the orientation and the general gist in the background, I think that'll be enough for me. You literally can go to that playlist. There will be a playlist with that title. And actually, there'll be a playlist that's 13. Each of these sections that's underneath the major large groups will have a name. So you'll have a playlist that says Start Here, Project 25, Phase 1, Executive Order Timeline. And those are 3 separate playlists. But it all kind of falls underneath this orientation and backbone category, right? So you have these 4 major categories. And then there's 13 actual playlists. So each one is its own topic. And we'll dive through every single one, right? But not everyone has to snack on each one. It's a buffet. You come and get what you like. Everybody's plate is not going to look the same. Some people want a full course meal, right? Some people want a little snack. Somebody wants an appetizer. Somebody wants some dessert. Not everybody going to have the same plate. That's okay. You come get what you need. And then when you're ready for your next plate, you come back up, right? So once again, I'm just going to say aloud just because I want to make sure I do read it to everyone here. So underneath the first category, right, you have the orientation and the spine, but it's also, your backbone. So you have the stay here. That is what this buffet is and how to navigate it, right? You'll have Project 25, Phase 1. That is the first 5 receipts and basic orientation. You have the executive order timeline, and it's starting with our current administration, and then I'm moving backwards. So I'm going to try to track it all the way back 30 years. So that's going to be our long arc. That's going to be one of those slow burn kind of categories. It's going to be when I can get the time to knock through the different doctrines and kind of make connections, right? But then you'll have your other ones, right? So that'll be like your regulatory station, pantry, money and market, and education. So if you go look at that playlist right now, you'll see that those particular 3 playlists already have some content already in it from the videos that have already been uploaded. We'll actually do just a slight excerpt from the pantry section just so you can get a little flavor for what the experience would be like, which I'm so excited to share with you guys. Like, I'm already starting to make some patterns and some connections there, so I'm super excited. You have the bodies and safety and rights. So you have body and birthright playlist, which kind of covers reproductive rights and family policy. You have interpersonal violence, the Violence Against Women Act that we have here, which will cover like domestic and gender-based violence. And also this one will be really interesting because this will be one of those topics where we do a comparative law contrast. So we want to get a really good foundation of how we use the language here, how we address it here in the United States, so we can do a really interesting comparison when it comes to like gender-based violence and domestic based violence in other jurisdictions. We'll have a civil rights folder where we dive into like discrimination and equal protection in practice. You have your corrections in neighborhoods, like your broken windows theory, policing, carceral logic, and all those kinds of things. There will be a folder that is called study and supports. So that will be, as we kind of talked about the comparative law, that'll be our comparative law sample. So if there's an area or a topic where we did a comparison, it would go directly in there. So say for instance, the discussion on gender-based violence, because there were some more recent cases that came up that would be interesting points to study. That will be, when we have the time, that will be one of the ones that goes into that sampler. You'll have civic foundation reading, so that'll be like a syllabus, any bibliographies that I might have come across that I've had over the years, source documents that I'm able to put up there. I'll definitely place them there, so that's an easy point of reference for you while you're on this page. And then just because I do have that social work background, I am always looking for ways that we can support the community and offer some coping opportunities and resources. So I have a folder that will specifically address that. We talk about things that really do impact us on a day-to-day, and sometimes that can feel a little heavy. So I definitely want to offer some supportive kinds of resources while we peruse through these different playlists and we kind of munch on these different topics and we collect our receipts and we nourish ourselves with this information. I wanted to make sure that self-care was a part of that process. So if at any point in time you're like, hey, this is kind of much, it's a buffet. You can step away and come right on back, right? So if you want, you can take a screenshot of this slide, because this is pretty much your map right here. This tells you where to go and where to locate it. And the big like 4 main categories and the subsets, which would be your different playlists. So if you want to just say, hey, I just want to look into Department of Education stuff, you just hit the playlist and just let it go auto and just binge everything right then and there. If you're like, hey, I want to jump around, you can jump around, whatever your pleasure. I'm trying to make sure that what I put up is very accessible and something that can be very satisfying while also not being overwhelming. So I'm trying to address a few needs all in one. Okay. I really wanted to make sure you could see the vision, so I'm going to give you another one. We're going to just slightly jump in. As you can see, we talked about this section right here, which is your orientation. So from there is the main starting point I would like most people to start with, but once again, at your discretion. We're going to jump into one of the other categories, right? So we're going to jump, just for an example, into regulatory stations, and we're going to jump right into the pantry. Okay? So pantry would be food and labels, right? We have a lot of stuff going on viral as of late with regard to food and labels. Okay, so I want to make sure nothing was happening with that page. Okay, with regards to food and labels. So just also before we jump into the pantry per se, I also want to describe the shorts, which is what's going to be a little bit more abundant. That's going to hold most of the receipts, right? That is your 15 to 60 second clips. Those are your receipts, the timestamps, anything new that I'm probably posting up, connections, anything that I'm finding out there, I'm going to throw it right there in the shorts. So it's a quick go-to. It's good for saving and sharing. I like to call that your desserts, you know, that little sweet little thing you kind of get in between stuff, right? So that's going to be the shorts. That's the dessert you kind of touch ever so often. So you had your main 4-course meal, right, that I had sitting over there, which is your main 4 categories. And then you have this dessert section. I didn't want to disregard this because it is definitely one here. So you got your main course, you got your little side. I won't even call it side, let's call it your dessert. Right? So now that we've seen our dessert, we've kind of know that you can go in right now and there are already 20 plus total videos that I already have on the page. The majority of those are under the category of desserts. Those would be your shorts. A lot of timestamps, a lot of receipts. Okay, so now that I have gone through that piece, I want to go ahead and spend just a little bit of time showing you like what a case study might look like, right? Just so you can kind of see how my brain works and understand the structure that I'm already laying out. So to show you how my brain works inside this buffet, let's start with something a lot of us have been seeing, which is that cranberry situation that happened just right around Thanksgiving, just literally like a week ago. We watched people online open a can on the camera, literally using a knife to open it, and literally we saw water, right? And this is a screenshot that's cut of what we saw online, right? The one particular lady that I'm referencing took a butcher knife with her hand, stabbed the can and opened it, and we saw that she had previously opened 2 other cans. I will, in an upcoming live, actually show an excerpt of the video. But this is just a quick screenshot, and you can actually see her handler from TikTok, so that all credit goes to her. I believe the name is Jazz. Once again, readily available public on TikTok. So there were 3 major incidents that were reported like on TikTok around Thanksgiving, but this is just one visual. Okay, so of that, what came out was basically, like I said, it was clear water liquid. It wasn't solid. It wasn't consistent with what you would expect cranberry sauce, right, to look like. Literally, it was clear, right? No real cranberry pigmentation, no reddish residue like you would expect from even like one mashed berry. There was literally, it looks like water. It literally looks like water. The can has that slightly tan metal look, so the liquid kind of picks up a little tint from that, but it was very clearly not cranberry, right? It didn't look like it was a derivative of cranberry in any way, shape, or form. So people reasonably called that mislabeling or misrepresentation. Fair enough, right? And we're not talking about one-off or like a no-name company, right? We're talking about multiple well-established brands that have been around for decades. And this wasn't a one-off. There were multiple cases reported throughout TikTok about these. So then we also know there's probably some that weren't being visually represented online, right? On this channel, that kind of situation lives in the Pantry Station. But I'm not here just to, potentially roast a company or try to make a company look bad. I'm not here to talk about them or shame them or anything like that. What I'm here to ask is, what in the system allowed this type of thing to show up across multiple big players at once? The same exact time frame. We're talking the same exact period. All of this occurred in November. There was another issue relevant to labeling with another big company, which would be 3 companies, right, in November. 3 would make that an established pattern. That is no longer isolated incidents. That would be systemic. Fair enough? So that particular example would live in the pantry, and it actually is present in the pantry. It's also some receipts that are available in the shorts. So this will give you just a little bit more of a visual for that, right? The pantry, who touches the can? So once you see that kind of pattern, the question stops being, what's wrong with this one can? Because a lot of times, my can is bad and I don't know why I had this happen to me. What was me? The bigger question, right? The bigger questions come. It becomes, which federal bodies touch this? How are they structured and funded? What are they actually required to do? Where did the guardrails move or soften? Like, where did they go, so to speak, right? And I pretty much apply the same question across the buffet, right? In the pantry, we're talking about food and labels. In money and markets, we're talking about credit reports, debt collection, and the watchdogs like the CFPB. CFPB, there are shorts currently available on the playlist and on the page, right? There are currently videos already on that topic. So that is something you can snack on tonight if you would like. I have content available relevant to that. So in the education, right, we're talking about the Department of Education, student loans, and policy, or school policy. Once again, that's something that also we have some current videos on. Some topics do not have videos yet, and some do. Those 3 particular topics do have some videos if you are interested. In the bodies and birth rates, interpersonal violence, civil rights, and corrections, we're talking about how law treats bodies, families, safety, neighborhoods, and rights. Okay? So this isn't like a food page. It isn't, it's more like a regulation and power page that uses real world experiences. What's in your cabinet? What's on your bill? What happens in your relationship and communities, and to point back to the structures behind it. Like, what's behind the thing that's causing things to occur in your life, right? Let's bring answers to it. Let's get some clarity. Okay, let me see if I want to move this to this next slide. Okay. So most of the time we follow a pretty consistent path where we analyze something, right? We start with everyday experience, the can in your pantry, the letter on your credit report, right? The loan statement, the court order, the protest, the news story, right? We start with this everyday experience, like how is this affecting me or affecting someone I know, I care about, or someone in my community, right? Then we move to the regulatory bodies that touch it, right? The food agencies, like financial regulators, the Department of Education, civil rights offices, etc., and so forth, right? Then we look at oversight and structure. Like, who supervises those agencies, right? Like, the person who supervises the previous one we just talked about, like, who supervises them? Like, who's their boss? Like, for real. Who supervises those agencies? What rules do they have to follow? Then the next question becomes, from there, we move into like executive orders and formal policy coming out of the White House. And then from there, we check the agencies. So basically, we check against bigger doctrines, right? So now that we've gotten to that level with the executives, then we check the bigger doctrines, like the Project 25, right? That's something we heard a lot about in the last, let's say, couple years. From various well-respected like resources, right? So asking, does this action line up with that doctrine recommended or predicted? Does it line up with what that document recommended or predicted, right? And when it's relevant, right? When it's relevant, we check other branches, right? Did Congress debate or vote on anything connected to this? Did the courts include, including the Supreme Court, issue rulings that raised or lowered the guardrails around this topic, right? These are things that help us get a better idea and framework of what's going on, why it's going on, who's involved, like who's moving the pieces. So this might sound complex, but the idea is very simple. It's really simple. We move from what just happened to me to who's regulating this to what did the person in charge write down and sign, right? What did they write down and sign? So when you start tracing structures like that, you run into long-term planning documents. And one of those, like I just mentioned, was like Project 25. And you may find, or better yet, you may have heard people describe like Project 25 as like a blueprint or a roadmap. My interest is not in the buzzword. My interest is always those receipts. I just want the receipts. What does the document actually say? And it's a 900-page document. Who is tied to it? Where does it talk about things like education, birth rate, civil rights, domestic violence, corrections, or household structures, right? And then how much of what we see right now lines up with it? Because that's what I want to know. I want to know where we fall in the timeline. That's what I want to know. If what's said is to be believed, right? Where do we fall in the timeline? These are things that are interesting to me because I've heard a lot of rhetoric. I have not seen receipts. I have not seen the research. I have not seen the data. I'm someone who likes to see receipts. I like data. I like numbers. I like information. So that's kind of where this is going. I like to see kind of how things line up. And that's where the executive order timeline playlist starts to come in too. So I'm starting with the playlist with our current administration because that's what's affecting people right now while you can still vote. So for me, I thought that would be a little bit more impactful instead of starting back in the 90s. It'd be more impactful to start now because if you hear or see something or read something and you're like, hey, I would like to engage in my civic duties and engage in, you know, organizing, voting, advocating, and things around it, then you have the information to do so. As opposed to if we started with the 90s and it takes me, you know, X amount of time to get to present day. So that's why I'm starting with current and moving towards 90s. While we start with the current year, keep in mind, like, as I'm able to move through this current year, you know, then we kind of backdate and we move to, you know, previous administration, then the previous administration, then their first term, then the previous administration, right? And then that would give us that time frame. So with that being said, we'll start to see the connections to like food, debt, education, body autonomy, safety, rights. We'll kind of see what connections are there and maybe what connections are not there. I'm very curious, right? And because I do like to like make sure I front load with it, that was roughly 30 years of decision making pretty much across multiple parties and presidents. It's not a marathon. I'm not racing, you know, like, well, better yet, it's more like a marathon. It's not a sprint. I'm not trying to race to get somewhere. I really want this to be accurate. I want this to be right. I want to feel like I'm really helping to put some really good information because we're getting the receipts, right? So with that being said, that playlist will grow slowly but steadily and firmly. So that also would be sometimes like pre-recorded videos. Sometimes those will be longer lives where we really just sit and we read through stuff together and timestamp stuff. And I'm excited for some of those experiences because I really will at some point start to just put some of the doctrines up and we can scan and read. And that will be, you know, I think very a fruitful experience for us here on this channel. As we move backwards, when we see a moment in the doctrines or in, like, let's say Project 25 or some other doctrine that we may get introduced to that seems like another one to add to the list that says we'd like to see X, we can ask, did any executive order or agency shift try to do that? Was it completed, partially started? Do we see any signs that it might be in progress now? You know, these are things I find so interesting and it would be nice to track those things. So I'm very excited for that experience, but keep in mind that will be a slow burn, as they call it. It's the marathon experience, definitely not the sprint. So with that also being said, I want to talk about the type of information that I gather. Let me just move through this. My apologies, I didn't move my slides with you all, but I'll put a static version of this. I was looking at my handwritten notes. So let's see. We're supposed to be talking about the source here. I put a note for public information. So essentially the sources that I have, everything I'm using is going to be public information because I feel like it needs to be highly accessible. So everything I'm using is public information, official government websites, statutory text, agency rules and reports, public hearings, transcripts, news articles that link back to primary sources. And honestly, another piece I want to bring in that may sound slightly unconventional, but I want to bring in peer-reviewed research or academic work. I'll tell you exactly what it is, like the author, the title, where it's published. So if you want to go deeper, you can. And another cool thing you can do when there are peer-reviewed articles, you can ask your local library to pull that article. You can search it in a database, or you can look up the author and request a copy directly from the author. I have found that they are very accommodating and very nice. They're so happy that you are reading their work that often they will give you a copy if you just reach out to them. So that is a resource that is available to you. I essentially just want you to feel like whatever I'm reading, I'm accessing, like you have access to it too, and I will do my best to make sure that you know where to access it from. I just don't feel that information should ever feel privileged. So I do my best to try to make sure that we can share the resource here. Okay. So as we to kind of come back to the conversation of each section, right? The 5 questions on your plate. When you are going to, let's say, each table, each playlist, right? Each major section, and you're bringing items with you onto your plate for you to consume, for you to take, for you to gather some nourishment. Know that I generally package those playlists and those sections with these 5 questions, right? It's not complete on my end until I can get those 5 questions. And those 5 questions are pretty much a standard who, what, when, where, why, but with just a little bit more under it, right? Under all of this, we're pretty much coming back to those same questions. And this is pretty much why I'm calling it your civic literacy plate, if you will. The 4 course and then them little desserts, right? The little slides, a little something you could touch on when it's in the shorts, right? Those are your desserts. So with regard to your course meal, right? Who is doing this and allowing it? What exactly is happening? When did it start? When does it reach, the everyday person? Like, when does it get to us? Where is it happening or enforced? And then why is it allowed to continue? Because sometimes we be like, that seemed problematic. How did that even happen? And then more importantly, why is it continuing to happen? That's a question I often have. Like, why is it continuing to happen? I'm curious about what protective or supportive factors are often in place to allow problematic things to occur, right? I'm always curious what makes some situations, or bodies so audacious to do certain things. So I'm always curious, and we have to dig deeper to get that answer. So that's something I try to add into each section. So realistically, some of you are like who people, some of you are like obsessed with the why. Some of you want the whole 5-course meal. You like me, you want the whole thing. Like we go in there, clump party at 6. I'm hungry, right? And that's totally fine. My job is just to keep the buffet labeled and sourced, so you can take what you need in that moment. And I won't, I won't say that I can make very long extended videos on every single topic about every single thing. I'm not going to be able to say that I can do that, because I don't know what my bandwidth and capacity will be. But what I know is that I will address these questions and I will present it and make sure that it's available in those playlists. I can't say that it'll always be a long live. They might be long form videos, or they might just be a series of receipts that address that. But I will get to putting that together so that you can have a plate and be nourished in a way that is comfortable for you. And know that you're pretty much getting this structure right here. So that kind of brings us into the beginning when I talked about, me being an international law student and my desire to study comparative law, right? Because I'm studying international law, I'm always interested in what this looks like outside the United States And once we built enough foundation here, once we know the who, what, the when, where, why for something like a Department of Education issue, a debt or CFPB like pattern, a domestic violence protection gap, a civil right question, a Project 25 aligned move, right? Then we can ask, like we can really ask, could this happen in other countries? Like how do other common law systems handle like something like this? How do civil law jurisdictions structure it? Like we can really just ask some really juicy, succulent questions, right? Sometimes we'll see deep dive comparisons. I do have a couple of comparative law videos available based off some of my earlier work. And other times it'll be just short sampler videos where we just say, here's one or two other models, here's how they line up or they differ, right? But I would definitely be adding those kind of comparisons in place. And that's what the comparative law sampler playlist is for. So we're not just sticking things in the old where, or we're just thinking that this is the only way that something can be done. I really like the idea of earmarking best practices and kind of seeing like, you know, are there other ways we could do this? Are we doing it in one of the best, most efficient ways? Or is there some other ways where we're like, oh, you know, it might be more effective or efficient if we did it this way? I just think us having lively conversations about that, honest, genuine conversations, really taking time to study and learn and being informed helps us be able to answer that kind of question. So with that all being said, I really see this as a collaborative project and not like a lecture series. I really see this as like a collaborative project. In lives, I'll make space for Q&A and for you to point out connections I might not have seen yet. And if you see a pattern or have a question like, hey, doesn't this also touch on other agencies or this other law? That's helpful to me, and I really enjoy that. I actually get quite excited when we can make more comparisons, more connections, and what have you. So once again, that is encouraged on my platform. I'm all for you being in the comments, making connections and having discussion, right? In terms of how we use the page, let's see. In terms of how we use the page, if you're brand new, start with pretty much this section right here. I'm going to get my mouse back out. You want to go to the section that's literally going to be called Start Here. You'll see it in the playlist. If you've been hearing about like Project 25 and wanted to like grounded intro, go into like Project 25 phase 1. And that's the first 5 receipts, right? Receipts that kind of make direct connections to it. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why. It's already established in that playlist. Phase 1, the first 5 receipts. If something specific is like pressing in your life, like, you know, food, money, education, domestic violence, civil rights, or like, you know, your neighborhood, you know, start with those stations that matches like your reality. If you're like, these are things that I see in my community, or these are things I see, experience, or things I just really feel like I want to be informed on, definitely just feel free to jump right in to the section that best fits. So keep in mind, I always say like start here, and then you're going to just venture over, right? Pick your station. Pick your station. And I always recommend that, you know, those coping and community resources, those are just resources that you can share. So it's never a harm to familiarize yourself with a resource so that you can be a resource to someone else, even if you don't need it. Someone you may come across may need it and benefit from it, so it doesn't harm you to just familiarize yourself, and that folder will always stay open. All of the folders are public and open. Let's see. Also, if you're like a reader, that civic foundation and reading resource section I think would be quite lovely. So, you know, definitely look into that one as well. I'm at this point, that is, I'm going to look and see if there's any questions or anything. Okay. So at that point, that kind of describes the whole buffet, right? The receipts buffet gives you the whole shebang. At the end of the day, this is about civic literacy and an informed consent. I want you to be informed as you walk into situations so you can make the best decision that aligns with you, your family, your community, right? Make the best decision that is, best for, like, humankind, mankind, and all of that, right? We may just like not be able to control everything these systems do, but we don't have to walk through them totally in the dark, even in, like, if the outcome isn't what you wanted. Being able to say, I read the fine print, I cross-reference, I asked informed questions is powerful, right? That really helps with the coping experience. So we say, I did my best. I went, I said something, I read it, I informed. Like, that's such a big piece to the coping element, and coming to terms. If in the event things don't go in the direction that would align with, your desires, your beliefs, or your understanding, being able to say you did put forth the effort to advocate for yourself is a big piece. So if you want fewer talking points, and more receipts in your feed, go ahead and subscribe, right? Because, like I said, I don't do the politics and things on my account. I'm coming with receipts. We're doing education. We're doing being informed. We are engaging in civic literacy and informed consent practices here. And when possible, we do it in a trauma-informed way, in a very respectful, collaborative community structure. So once again, if you feel like that's something that sounds like it's interesting to you, literally go ahead and subscribe. Check out the Start Here playlist and make sure you screenshot the buffet key if you haven't already. Keep in mind, I will make a static version of this and have it available online. I think actually it's the first one I put up already. So it's a static version of this already available so that you can just get the screenshots that you need directly from there. You only kind of have to move through like 30 seconds or like 2 minutes as opposed to like an hour-long live or 2 hours, however long, the live is that day. So if you haven't already, then you pick the station that makes most sense for you and where you are in your life right then and there. And I will keep adding to this buffet over time. Yeah, you will be thoroughly nourished here. I will move through this buffet over time as I'm able, and I appreciate you being able to be here while it grows. Know that we are eating over here, right? That this is for the nourishment of you and what you're able to do for yourself, your family, your community. And once again, it's time to eat. We are hungry. We are excited, and once again, just thank you so much for supporting my page. You don't understand how much happiness that brings me to know that I really didn't tell anyone that I was creating this page. I literally just started putting this stuff there and just figured I would contact people once I had it fully ready. I mean, I put a lot together already in preparation, but to know that, to get like 6,000 views in 3 days is just, my heart is so warm. To already have 7 subscribers it just really makes my heart so warm and lets me know that I'm in the right place at the right time, putting this project out here, and that you are at the right place in the right time because it resonates with you. You like the content, you're subscribing, and I will continue to produce receipts because this is the receipts buffet structure that we have so that we can eat. We literally are legally everywhere because we are what? We are legally everywhere. And these events are literally happening everywhere and they are affecting us in every way. So we have a right to be informed and to make decisions. This is Adrienne signing off. Thank you so much for being here today. And I look forward to seeing you at the next live. But if by any chance you was like, yeah, no, I need more, don't you worry. There are over 20 videos on the channel, and they're already moved into the appropriate playlist. Feel free to peruse through and snack on some very nourishing clips that we have available, and peruse through the receipts. Once again, this is Adrian, and you have a wonderful day and transformative day on purpose. Bye.